Austin, it's me.
I'm sorry, you must be mistaken.
Mistaken, we were together for 7 years.
I don't know you.
It was a Tuesday. Ordinary. Fluorescent lighting, the low hum of a refrigeration unit somewhere behind me, a basket in my hand with nothing in it yet but my keys and my phone. I was buying milk. That was the entire plan. That was the last plan I ever made as the person I was, before I turned that corner. He was in the cereal aisle. I saw him before he saw me. 3 seconds. That was all I had. And in those 3 seconds, the world kept moving around me like I wasn't standing in the middle of it with my chest caving in. He was laughing. The laugh I used to replay on the nights he didn't call. The laugh I told myself was mine. A little girl was pulling at his sleeve. A boy stood beside the cart with his hands in his pockets the way boys do when they're trying to look older than they are. And a woman, her hand resting on Austin's arm, the way you only touch someone whose body has become as familiar as your own, was reading the back of a cereal box like it was the most peaceful Tuesday of her life. I counted. 3 children. The boy looked about 9. 9 years ago was the year I met Austin. The girl pulling at his sleeve was maybe 6. 6 years ago was the year Austin told me our relationship needed more time. And then the youngest, sitting in the cart seat, maybe 2 years old, chewing on the seatbelt strap with both hands like it was the most important thing in the world. 2 years old. I felt the basket handle go slick in my palm. The math happened without my permission, the way breathing happens, the way falling happens. That child in the cart had been conceived while I was being driven to a clinic, while Austin was holding my hand, while he was telling me we simply were not ready. 2 years old. I understood everything. Behind me, the cashier had stopped moving. A woman 3 feet away with a handbasket had gone completely still. I didn't look at either of them. I couldn't look away from that toddler's face. Austin turned around. The moment his eyes found mine, something moved across his face I had never seen in 7 years. Not guilt, not shock, something colder than both. Calculation. He smiled at me. He actually smiled, like we still had a secret. Like 3 babies and a wife and 3 children, and that smile were all just pieces of something he still believed he could manage. I set my basket down on the floor, and I walked toward him. Let me tell you what 7 years looks like from the inside. It looks like a man who calls every single day. Not sometimes, not when he remembers. Every day. Morning or night, 5 minutes or 2 hours, but always. It looks like a man who remembers the name of the coworker who upset you 3 weeks ago and asks about it unprompted, who shows up at your door with medicine when you're sick and sits with you when you're feverish and half asleep and completely unglamorous. A man who makes you feel without dramatic declaration like you matter more than whatever else is happening. That is what 7 years looked like. That is what held me in place. I met Austin when I was 26. He was warm and certain, and he had a way of listening that made you feel like the rest of the world had gone quiet specifically for you. What I didn't know was that his oldest child was already 2 years old, already walking, already saying words, already existing in a life Austin had carefully kept just out of frame. I told myself he was private, protecting what we had. I stacked 7 years of patience on top of that explanation and never once asked whether it was true. Looking back, I can see the cracks I mistook for character. The holidays he was always unavailable for but never explained. The way his phone would go completely silent for a full day, and then he would reappear, warm and attentive, and I would be so relieved to hear his voice that I never asked where he had been. The friends I never met, the address I never had, the life he kept just slightly out of frame in every conversation. I notice these things the way you notice a draft in a house you love. You pull your sleeves down. You stay. Year 3, I brought up the future. Gently. Austin took my hands, looked at me with complete steadiness, and said the relationship needed a foundation before it could hold the weight of forever. He said it like a man who had thought deeply about love and responsibility. I believed him completely. What I didn't know was that his second child was born that same year. While he was telling me we needed more time, he was going home to a growing family. Year 5, he spoke about the future in specifics: a home, stability, a life that looked exactly like what I had been waiting for. I held on to those conversations like evidence. They were not evidence. They were architecture. He was building a ceiling and calling it a sky. Year 6, he talked me out of our first pregnancy. Year 6.5, the second. Year 7, the third. 3 different reasons, 3 different years, the same calm hands, the same measured voice, financial instability, relational timing, readiness. 3 different packages, the same thing inside each one, and I took all of it, because I had 7 years of evidence that those hands were safe. I was not foolish, I was not weak. I was targeted by someone who had studied exactly how much I trusted him and calculated precisely how far that trust would carry him. 7 years, and I never met his family. I told myself he was private. He was hiding. The first time I found out I was pregnant, I sat on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes before I could stand up. Terrified, quietly, secretly, overwhelmingly overjoyed. I thought this was the moment everything shifted. The thing that would finally make the future he kept describing become real. I called him shaking. He came within the hour. He took my hands. He was calm, warm, so completely Austin. He said bringing a child into financial instability wasn't love, that real love waits until the foundation is solid. He said he wanted that with me more than anything. He said not yet, like it was a promise. Every word sounded like care. He drove me to the clinic, held my hand through all of it, bought me soup on the way home, then went quiet for 2 weeks and said he was processing. So I grieved alone, convinced we were grieving together. We were not. The second time, I felt something shift before I even told him. Not suspicion exactly, more like a vibration underneath the floor, a recognition without a name. But 2 data points against 6 years of trust is not enough to build a case on. I told him anyway. Austin was calm again. Different reason this time. We were at the most critical point in our foundation. A pregnancy now would fracture something almost whole. We were so close. He could feel it. Different words, same shape, same hands, same quiet afterward. Longer this time. I noticed the length of that quiet. I filed it somewhere I didn't yet know how to open. The third time, I wasn't hopeful. I wasn't frightened. I was exhausted in a way I couldn't explain to anyone because I had never told a single person about the first 2. I was carrying all 3 of them alone. I sat across from Austin and watched his face arrange itself into that familiar calm, and I heard him say, "We simply were not ready yet." And something in my chest stood up, pushed against my ribs, wanted to overturn the table and demand, ready for what? By whose timeline? According to which version of the future he kept describing, but never seemed to get any closer to? I said nothing, because I still didn't have the language, because he had never once lied to me, or so I believed. And 7 years of that belief is not a small thing to climb over. He drove me to the clinic a 3rd time, held my hand a 3rd time. The soup on the way home was a different kind. I noticed that, filed it in the same place I couldn't open. 3 months of quiet followed. The longest quiet yet. I didn't leave after the first because I trusted him. I didn't leave after the second because I didn't have a name for it yet. By the third, I was so deep inside the life he kept promising that leaving felt like burning down everything I had already survived to build. That is what it looks like from the inside. I know that now. What I didn't know, what I was about to learn under fluorescent lighting on an ordinary Tuesday, was that every time Austin drove me home in silence, every time he said not yet and disappeared for weeks, he wasn't processing. He was going home. To her. To them, to the life he had been protecting from me the entire time I thought I was building it with him. And he was about to find out that I finally had the language. I was not looking for anything. I need you to understand that. I was not following him. I was not suspicious. I had a basket and a list and 4 things on it, and I turned into the cereal aisle because cereal was one of the 4. He had not seen me yet. I saw the woman first, then the cart, then the children. I counted them the way your mind counts things before you give it permission. 3. The boy, 9 years old. 9 years ago, the year I met Austin. The girl, 6. 6 years ago, the year Austin said we needed more time. And the youngest, 2 years old, maybe just past 2, chewing on the cart strap with both hands like it was all that existed. I looked at that child and my mind went very quiet and very fast at the same time. 2 years old means conceived approximately 2 years and 9 months ago. My third termination was 3 months ago. That pregnancy, 7 months before that. The conception window of the child in the cart and the pregnancy Austin told me we were not ready for, they overlap. They overlap exactly. That child in the cart had been conceived while Austin was sitting across from me, while he was holding my hand in that clinic, while he was buying me soup and going quiet and telling me he was processing. He was not processing. He had a pregnant wife at home. I felt the basket handle in my hand like it belonged to someone else. Austin turned around. Our eyes met and I watched something happen in his face I had never seen in 7 years. Not guilt, not shock. Something that moved faster than both and settled into control before I could read what was underneath it. The same face from 3 clinic waiting rooms. Behind me, the cashier stopped mid-motion. A woman to my left had gone completely still. The aisle hadn't changed. The fluorescent lights were the same. The cereal boxes exactly where they'd always been. Everything was the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. Austin said my name like a question, like I was a problem he could still reframe his way out of. His wife turned to look at me. She had no idea who I was. She was looking at me the way you look at a stranger, because to her, that is exactly what I was. A stranger, in a cereal aisle, on a Tuesday, holding 7 years with nowhere left to put them. I set the basket down. My hands were completely steady. I took 1 step toward him, then another. And Austin, for the first time in 7 years, took 1 step back. He moved sideways before I reached him, 1 deliberate step to the left, putting his body between me and his wife like a door closing. 7 years, and I finally understood what that instinct meant. He had always been a door. I just never saw what he was keeping on the other side of it. He spoke first, low, controlled, almost gentle, the voice I had trusted with every soft and breakable thing I owned. Stella, this is someone I used to work with. I think there may be some confusion. Someone he used to work with. I felt something in my chest go completely, dangerously still. His wife looked at me, polite, neutral, the look you give a stranger whose reason for stopping isn't yet clear. She had kind eyes, I noticed that. I don't know why I noticed it, but I did. The boy with the pocketed hands had gone very still. The girl was pressed against her mother's side, and the toddler in the cart, the one whose age had just rewritten my last 7 years, wrapped both hands around Austin's finger without looking away from my face. I did not raise my voice. I had not come to perform. I had come because my legs had carried me forward, and my hands were steady, and I finally finally, had the language. I looked past Austin, directly at his wife. Year 6, I said. He told me we weren't financially stable enough for a child, that real love waits for a solid foundation. I watched her face. I believed him. He drove me to the clinic. He held my hand. Austin said my name, a warning inside a question. I kept going. Year 6.5, he said the relationship was at its most critical point, that a pregnancy would fracture something almost whole. My voice did not shake. He drove me to the clinic again, held my hand again. Stella, harder this time, the smile gone completely. You need to. Year 7, clean, flat, final, said directly over him. He said we simply weren't ready. Third different reason, same clinic, same hand holding mine on the way there. The wife had stopped blinking. Your youngest, I said, and I looked at the toddler in the cart, is approximately 2 years old. I looked back at her. My third termination was 3 months ago. The pregnancy your husband told me we weren't ready for, the conception window and your youngest child's conception window are the same month. That child was conceived while he was driving me to a clinic. The silence in that aisle was total. Behind me, I felt it spreading. The cashier, both shoppers, a third person who had turned the corner and stopped the moment they felt the weight of what was happening. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The fluorescent lights hummed over all of us like nothing in the world had changed. Austin's wife's face did something I will never forget. It didn't crumble, it didn't rage, it went quiet. The specific quiet of a person whose solid ground has just opened beneath them, and they are still deciding whether they are falling. She was doing the math, her own math, about her own life. Austin turned to me, something in his face I had never seen and never want to see again. Not guilt, not remorse, something uglier than both. You are being completely unstable right now, low, controlled, designed to make everyone in earshot question me instead of him. I don't know what you think is happening, but I was in love with a man who already had a family. My voice came out steady as a hand on a railing. I ended 3 pregnancies because he told me we weren't ready. His youngest child was conceived while I was pregnant with the baby he talked me out of keeping. That is not instability. I held his eyes for 1 full second. That is a crime he committed against me 3 times. I looked at his wife. And now, you know it too. I walked toward the exit. Behind me, the silence held. The cashier, both shoppers, the third bystander, all of them still and witnessing, and not one of them moving to stop me or defend him. Their stillness was the loudest thing in that store. I did not look back. I pushed through the door into the afternoon light and walked until I reached my car, sat down, closed the door, put both hands on the steering wheel. My hands were still steady. It was still Tuesday, and my phone, face up on the passenger seat, had already begun to ring. Austin's name on the screen. Once, twice, then a third time. I sat in that car for a long time. The afternoon light moved across the dashboard the way it does when you are completely still and the world is not. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I sat with both hands on the steering wheel, and I waited to feel something I could name. My phone rang twice more. I watched Austin's name appear and disappear like he was knocking on a door he had already burned down. I did not answer. The texts started that evening. I read each one once, only once, then screenshotted it and put my phone face down on the table. The first message, an explanation. What I had witnessed wasn't what I thought. Context was missing. He was sorry I was hurting. I screenshotted it. The second, he had always cared about me. What we had was real. I was rewriting history in a moment of pain. I screenshotted it. The third was the one that showed me exactly who he had always been. In it, my behavior in that grocery store became the problem, the scene I had caused, the innocent children who were present.
Did I understand what I had done to a family that had nothing to do with whatever I was feeling? A family, his family, the one that had everything to do with everything I had been feeling for 7 years. I screenshotted it, put my phone in a drawer, made tea I didn't drink, and sat with the word innocent, how he used it for the family he had hidden while framing me as the disruption. Same architecture, different damage to control.
3 days later, an unknown number messaged me. "This is his wife. I need to ask you some things. Please." I stared at it for a long time, then typed one word back. "Okay." She asked 3 questions, one at a time, each arriving separately, like she needed a moment between each answer before she could send the next. How long? 7 years. A long pause. How many times? 3. A longer pause. Did you know about us? No, I did not know you existed until Tuesday. She went quiet for a full day, 24 hours. I did not sleep well through any of them. I kept picking up my phone and putting it back down, thinking about her face in that aisle, the specific quiet that had come over it when she started doing her own math. Then her message arrived. I read it once, and my vision went strange at the edges. I read it again, then a third time. I was 3 months pregnant with our youngest when he drove you to that clinic. I did not know. I need you to know that I did not know. She was 3 months pregnant with the child I had seen in that cart, chewing on the seatbelt strap. She was already carrying that baby when Austin was in a clinic waiting room holding my hand and telling me we were not ready. He had driven home from my clinic to a pregnant wife. I did not reply. There was nothing to say that the message hadn't already said. I saved it with the others, labeled the folder with the date, and closed it. A week later, Austin sent one final message. "I'm asking you to let this go for the sake of people who had nothing to do with what happened between us. They don't deserve this." I read it once, screenshotted it, saved it. And I thought about the word deserve, how he used it, and for whom, and the 3 babies who never got the chance to find out what they deserved. I did not reply. But somewhere across the city, a woman who had spent a week doing her own math was sitting with her own silence, and I knew she was not going to let it go either. Grief does not wait for a convenient moment. It had been sitting in the corner of every room I'd been in for 7 years, patient, quiet, wearing the stories Austin gave me to make it bearable. A responsible decision, an act of patience, a mutual sacrifice. Those stories dissolved the morning I read his wife's message for the 3rd time. What was underneath them was not 1 loss, it was 5. And grief insisted, firmly, without negotiation, that I look at each one separately, that I not collapse them, that I give each one its full size. The first baby, year 6. I had been terrified and quietly overjoyed, and I had trusted the man across the table completely. That baby deserved to be grieved as itself, not as a data point, not as the beginning of a pattern, but as the thing it was before Austin turned it into a problem to manage. I let myself do that. It took a long time. The second baby, year 6.5, I had felt something shift and overridden it with trust. That baby deserved its own grief too, separate, full size. The third baby, year 7, the one whose conception window matched the child in that cart, the one Austin had looked me in the eye about while his wife was already carrying his child across town. I could not rush through this one. I did not try. Then, the relationship. Not the man, but the relationship I believed I was in. The one where we were always almost ready, almost there. I grieved it because I had lived inside it fully, and it had been real to me, even if it was never real at all. And then the 7 years themselves. Not as a block, year by year, each one containing specific moments where I had made myself smaller, quieter, more patient to fit inside the space he had available for me. 5 losses, each one named, each one held at full size. I called my sister on a Thursday night 2 weeks after the grocery store. I told her everything. All 3 pregnancies, all 7 years, the grocery store, the wife's message, from the beginning, without softening any of it. She did not say, "Why didn't you tell me?" She said, "I'm coming over." She was at my door in 40 minutes. She sat at my kitchen table, and she did not try to fix it or find the lesson in it before I was ready. She just stayed, for hours, until I had said everything that needed to be said out loud to someone who loved me. That was the first night in 7 years I fell asleep without calculating when he might call. I found the wife's profile online a month later. I looked at it for a long time. The photographs, the ordinary evidence of a life that had existed in full parallel to mine for 7 years. I did not send a message. What she does with what she knows belongs to her. I closed the tab. I did not open it again. What I did instead was sit in my apartment and notice, really notice, that the quiet was mine. Not the held breath quiet of a woman waiting for a call, not the quiet of arranging herself around someone else's schedule and silences and reasons. Just mine. 6 months is not a long time. I want to be honest about that. 6 months is not enough to unknow 7 years. It is not enough to unfeel 3 clinic waiting rooms or unsee a toddler in a cart on an ordinary Tuesday. I am not recovered. I am not going to tell you otherwise. What 6 months is, what it can be, is a beginning of presence. I was not present for 7 years. Presence requires not waiting, and I was always waiting. So busy waiting, I had forgotten what it felt like to simply be in a room without holding space inside it for him. I am learning that again. Last week, I took a different route to work. Not for the memories, but because the old route was built around his neighborhood, and I do not need to route my life around a man who was routing his around a family I didn't know existed. It took 4 extra minutes. I didn't mind. I cooked dinner on a Wednesday because I was hungry. Left my phone in the other room. The food tasted like food. I noticed that. I took Saturday mornings back. All of them. No space held open, no half attention aimed at a phone that might ring. Just Saturday. Just coffee and light and whatever came next. Small decisions. Unremarkable from the outside. Everything from the inside. This is not rebuilding. I want to be precise about that. Rebuilding implies a version of me before Austin worth reconstructing. But I was 26 when I met him, and I had barely started, and he arrived so early and stayed so long that I built myself around him without realizing it. So this is not rebuilding. This is building, for the first time, on ground that was always there, solid, unheroic, ordinary, underneath the 7 years of waiting I had stacked on top of it. A mutual contact approached me 6 months after the grocery store. Austin had a message. They delivered it carefully, like a kindness. I let them finish. Then I said, I have nothing to say to him, and nothing I need to hear. 10 seconds, done. My sister asked one evening whether I regretted the 7 years. I sat with it honestly before answering. Then I said, I regret that I made myself small enough to fit inside his lie. I don't regret who I was. I showed up, I was honest, I was present, every single time. The problem was never me. She put her hand over mine. Neither of us spoke for a while. Here is what I know now, what these 7 years taught me at a cost I will spend the rest of my life accounting for. A man who keeps you private is not protecting the relationship. He is protecting himself from the consequences of it. A man who is never ready is not waiting for the right time. He is waiting for you to stop asking. And a man who holds your hand on the way to a clinic while his wife carries his child at home, that man is not your partner. He is your warden. And you will not know the difference until the day you turn a corner and the truth is simply standing there in a cereal aisle on a Tuesday, chewing on a cart strap, 2 years old. It is Tuesday evening as I tell you this. There's food on the stove, ordinary light through the window, my phone on the counter, just a phone. I walked into that grocery store carrying 3 babies he told me we weren't ready for, while his youngest was already learning to walk at home. I walked out my own truth. He had a whole life he hid from me for 7 years, and I was the one who didn't know. I know now, and I am done. But I know he is not. Somewhere across the city, the life he built on top of mine is still standing, and somewhere in that life, a woman is sitting with a message she sent me, I did not know, and doing the slow, quiet work of deciding what comes next. I don't know what she will choose, but I know what I have chosen. Ground, presence, truth. And not one more Tuesday spent waiting for a man who was always already home. If you have ever been someone's secret, leave one word below. Just one word. I will read every single one.